Our next story, Adweek, Gino put out an article titled, AI isn't cutting marketing jobs, but it is making them harder. And I quote, according to proprietary data prepared for Adweek by research firm Newton X, most organizations report little to no AI-driven headcount reduction. At the same time, a majority of marketers say their day-to-day responsibilities have shifted with expectations rising around speed, complexity, and output. That's Mark Stenberg from Adweek. And so, to talk about this, we have the digital prophet coming in to speak on it, the CMO whisperer, to give a little bit of a CMO State of the Union. David Shing, AKA Shingy, joins us. Last week, he spent time with 30 different CMOs, learning, understanding what's going on. Nobody better to speak on the pulse of the state of marketing coming in to an AI world than Shingy. Let's kick it over and let's talk with Shingy about this.
David Shing, thanks for joining.
Hey guys, what's up?
Not much, just chilling. Shingy, I think I want to start, like, we hear there's like countless articles and discussion around what the CMO, what the marketer is facing today. I kind of want to get your reaction, maybe a little bit of a state of the union of the CMO, of the marketer, based on everything that you're doing, because you're actually talking to these people. It's not a research report. Like, you're spending time with these people. So just want to give the floor to you, a little state of the union from Shingy.
You know, I think that and thanks for that, guys. It's great to see you again, and welcome to your new office. I see it's very, very adult. Well done. But look, a couple of things I just want to give you a heads up on. There's no chief marketing officer anymore. It's like the chief matrix observer. It's a very interesting time, spiritually, politically, physically, just for people generally. And imagine owning brands. So what's interesting for me is at the beginning of the year, I get to sit with a bunch of CMOs to see what's going on and just ask them some very direct questions about the state of the union as they see it, and not about more macro than just, the tactics, but real simple stuff like whose budget's going up, raise your hands, whose budgets, or who's been asked to do more with less, what does that look like? And you determine what that means. It could be headcount, it could be budget, you need to figure that out. And then the last question is who's launching something unique? And I get very few hands in there launching something unique. There's something about when things feel like they're a bit sensitive, being bold and launching new products essentially might be on the back burner while they're trying to make the other things efficient. So they're the three macro things that I'm seeing. And then on the micro part of that, it's the fine dance and balance between how do I make sure that this spectrum of AI right at this very corner of the screen and right at this very corner of the screen is creators, and somewhere in the middle is this thing called marketing. And they're trying to figure out what that means because they're told to do it everywhere, all at once, with all this efficiency. And they're trying to figure out what those two spectrums look like, as well as trying to figure out what their bit in the middle is. So there's this kind of balancing between how do I do both of these things, which are always in the zeitgeist of the conversation, but actually do things that actually make my brand move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder, do you think that phenomenon that you're talking about, bridging AI and creative, have you seen anything similar? I think people always make the comparison to the internet and the dawn of that. But I'm just curious, with your experience, is there anything that you're drawing back on experience-wise to bring as like advice or thoughtful conversations with CMOs?
Jack, thanks for that question, because I have seen Web 1. I was there for the early days of this stuff when Silicon Alley was just being formed versus Silicon Valley and all that sort of rubbish, which was really a moment of excitement. So everybody wanted to create this thing called community, and what's amazing is that's what people really want to do now. So if we had this discussion 12 months ago, I would have said, yeah, it feels like we were back at the dawn of the internet because everything can be created. But the truth is this: none of the tools that we're seeing today are necessarily new. They're just being accelerated, and the refinement of those tools at like breakneck speed. It's almost going from oldest freehand, you can look that up on the internet later, all the way to something as crazy and easy as Canva, but all happening within the space of 6 months, not 25 years. And that's really what's unique. And what I find fascinating is it feels different than the dawn of the internet, because if it was the dawn of the internet times, shouldn't we be doing a lot more radical things in a lot more radical places? And the question I have for others after I ask those three questions is can you tell me the last 3 apps you downloaded? And rarely I get anybody saying, oh, I downloaded this app because. It's kind of like, I downloaded this utility because this app needed me to have that utility. And I've used it once and I'm not going back to it. So habits have already been formed, and where we feel like it's super open, it's not. It's become more narrow. So people are spending time and spending effort on their brand in some very narrow places, which also tells me that niche is pretty wild. So I've been saying for years that niche is the new mass, but I'm actually seeing that happen now, because if you go to Reddit today, you don't go to the homepage, you go to a subreddit. If you go into TikTok, you don't hang out in TikTok, you hang out in channels. If we were to go into discourse, you're not going to discourse, you go into Discord channels. So we're going to these places of communities. But what's fascinating to me is that, when you're thinking about brand architecture, people are just thinking about where they need to put their placement. So the two things that we've talked about for forever, I'm using a lot of the edges of the screen at the moment because I hope the middle will actually attach itself at some point. But people are talking a lot about media, like where am I placing? What am I doing? If we had this discussion 20 years ago, we would have talked about blind networks, and we would have talked about ad buying when you don't know where the ad is being placed, but you're buying on audiences. And then over here, they're saying, I really need to buy on these brands because I'm told that these brands are where my audiences are. And in the middle is the rest of the internet. And what's interesting about that today, it's no different. The only difference is brands are trying to call out that mystery, which is where the margin is, because now if I can have good sets of data that are super clean, and I have really good relationship with my agencies, for example, and I know exactly where they're spending their time and what tools they're using to do that, then that efficiency should allow me to optimize. So that's a bit different. Does that help answer your question? Does that provide any?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you said that really stuck to me there is the mystery is in, or the margin is in the mystery.
Yes.
To me, and that almost like lends itself to even what you're talking about, this idea of letting love rule. The mystery and like taking those bold actions and doing something new and not falling back onto what's comfortable. Is that where the margin is? Am I getting there with the idea of the mystery, and that's where the margin is?
Yeah, brother, because at the end of the day, and thanks for hitting on that, let rule for me, it's created an interesting groundswell, particularly when somebody said, one of my points was, I think that optimization is what we've sort of played for, but love actually polarizes. And what I mean by that is that you don't have to be loved by everybody, but boy, it feels good when you do. And we're in a world where it feels like it's love or hate. To be liked is to be invisible, in my mind. And so when I think about that, the optimization of efficient creative, the optimization of make more with less, the optimization of sure this can be done quicker, all of those things to me say that we're just in this world of optimization. We're not in the world of harmonizing. We're not in the world of actually creating something that feels like it could be, has longevity. It almost feels like stunts, and that's where I think we're at a different place. You did a tour of the West Coast with a bunch of these incredible agencies and some of these people that made some of the most iconic work that we've ever seen. Their brief at the time was, how do you actually create momentum? How do you create momentum for these brands that are relatively new? How do you create things that sustain? How do you burn into somebody's memory bank that when they're going to choose A or B, how do they make a decision to make A? All of that would have just been, well, wouldn't love be the thing that you want? I want somebody to say, I love that brand, dude. I just love that idea. And it feels like we've dulled it down. We've taken the shiny off. Because what happens when you create optimization and efficiency, this is coming from a data point of one, but I see it everywhere. And I love how close AI is getting to sort of realistic movie making and all of those amazing things about digital avatars and personas. Love that. Love that for many reasons of efficiency. But I don't love that when you're trying to build a brand that people really want to love, because what happens to me, if you apply that to music, you end up with this synthetic music. And so what happens is there's just something about it that makes me feel like it's starting to flatten out. And when it starts to flatten out, things start to look similar, man. We all start to be even again. And at some point, if the floor's being raised because of these incredible tools, the ceiling has to be something unique, dude. And that's where I find it to be more like the old days when we talked about the retroness of Web 1 that you wanted to maybe link at. But creatively, I just don't think we're there because we're still held by the usual KPIs that brands are looking for.
So I'm curious then, of all the brands that you're noticing today that are sticking out, what's a brand that's doing the right things and potentially has less budget, whatever it might be, they're sticking out in your mind, they're developing that love for you, Shingy?
Yeah, there's a couple that are pretty obvious. Gino, if I was to sort of dig into the things that come top of mind, it would be, somebody asked me recently, what's your favorite piece of branded content? And my answer to that is the Lego movie, the original Lego movie. I mean, I spent $20 having Lego show me their product for 2 hours, for God's sake. I mean, that's nuts. I didn't even have a kiddo at the time. So this is one example, but that's Lego, right? And they also moved from bricks to entertainment at a really hard time for their brand. So that's a whole nother story for another time, which I'm sure you know. But that's pretty obvious to me. But if I look at, let's talk about brands that are probably less obvious, that do sort of have this incredible story about love, in my mind. Baggu is a really good example of a brand that goes upcycling plastics into a shopping bag that has moved into great collabs. A24 have moved into, it's not about films, it's about cult stories, which I think is pretty amazing. Gentle Monster, as somebody who wears goggles all day, every day, I look at them and think, I don't go to them because they sell groovy goggles, they just don't. They sell atmosphere. You go into their store and every couple of weeks the thing radically changes. It's like, my God, what is happening here? So a lot of these are around experiences. Like, what does the product do that makes you feel like you can experience this brand in a way that's really interesting? And I would say, this is really niche. You know Fishwife? You know that brand? It's
No.
a sardine brand. So I'm a design freak, guys, so if you didn't know that already. But you know, the whole sardine tin phenomenon's taken off.
Yeah.
And if you look at Fishwife, oh my God. The design element, the colors. I mean, I would just buy that thing off the shelf just because, and then find out it's stinking sardines. You know what I mean? I mean, there's something about just that boldness where it just feels like it's different. And that's, and look, the obvious other ones are, you know, I wrote about Lego recently doing a collab with Crocs. I'll probably never wear these things, but they're a big rectangular shoe, you know, and you think, oh my God, you're walking around with a Lego brick. It couldn't be more obvious, but how incredible. If you look at the unbranded stuff that Heinz do, that's quietly happening in the background, and it's not just ketchup, but they also do it with Hillman's. Like, they just do these interesting products that feel like, hey, try this on, and if it sticks, it's like, let's do more of that trying on, and maybe we should do this. And so there's this, it feels like there's permission to do these little experiments to see if they take, and then they end up being a product.
Right. Yeah, I just love the idea of Shingy just being like appalled or just so excited about the Lego movie in the it's such a good movie. The one time when I watched it, I was very hesitant to watch the Lego movie because you're just like,
Cool.
am I actually gonna, and then you get to the end and you're like, that was one of the best pieces of film. It moved me in a way that I never thought that Legos could move me, and I'm glad that me and you're on the same page on that one, Shingy.
See, now we can go watch a film together. I'll talk about just some other brands that's probably not something I wouldn't closely align with, like Pop Mart. I'm not really a big fan of the little tchotchkes, but talk about driving anticipation. I mean, these guys have been at it for a long time, and they get lines and lines and lines around the block, which I think is pretty amazing. So you look at somebody like Pop Mart, which is nuts, and then you've got Topo Chico, so I live in Mexico. And you got Topo Chico. Man, I didn't even know what this brand was. It looks like a brand from 100 years ago. It's owned by one of the big bottlers. It's probably owned by Coca-Cola now or somebody like that. But it looks like it's got this mystique to it. It's got all of this symbolism in the actual bottle label, and the bottle is glass. So it kind of makes you want to collect it, and it stands out from this fast-moving culture, priced at the same products. So it's almost like with this array of everything and more is more, where is my choice going? What do I go for? And it aligns with something that sort of is a baseline of experimentation. It drives anticipation, and it gives you this mystique. It's like, oh, I'm curious about sparkling water, for God's sake.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
It is great. Topo Chico is a really, they have a great design. But Shingy, thank you so much for the time. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for everything.
Gentlemen.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again very soon. That was the digital prophet himself. Thank you.